nothing about this job that's easy, and no place I'd rather be.
By the 80s, it was over. It was the beginning of the end.
The story of the shrimp fleet in Fort Myers Beach, and really Gulf-wide, is a story of near constant adversity.
We had its ups and downs. It wasn't always a heyday. We had some slim days, but for the most part, it was a profitable business, despite the increasing price of ice and fuel and so forth. We all lived what I would call a comfortable life.
That comfortable life would soon become a thing of the past, as those once small challenges grew into real burdens for the shrimpers of the 1970s.
We used a lot of ice and a lot of fuel, and it was extremely expensive, and it got so that the business was not as profitable. But what really hurt the shrimp industry was imports and farm-raised shrimp. And people may buy the farm-raised shrimp and the imports, but not me. I want the pink Gulf shrimp.
It was the beginning of the end. By the 80s, it was over. The fleet downsized from 1,500 boats to, 400 or 500 boats, just like that. There'll always be somebody trying to make a living. I really think it's a dying business. I've seen it everywhere.
In the 70s, it dwindled down, as the first generation was going out of it. The fleet operations stopped, and then the cousins got and ran their own boats then.
In the late 50s, there were probably a couple hundred boats here. In the 60s, there were probably, we'd have boats come over from Texas. I mean, boats were all over the place. Everybody was busy.
There was more net shops, there was 2 supply houses, there was probably 6 or 8 welding shops, maintenance shops.
In 1976, a change in international waters regulation meant that Mexican shrimping grounds closed to American fishermen.
It was very, very busy. But remember, they were fishing down off of Mexico then, but the Mexican government has since closed those fishing grounds. So they have less and less area where they can fish.
It started with gas prices and the shutdown of Mexican waters in the 70s. Then the punches just kept on coming for the independent shrimper, who keeps on surviving against the odds.
They have costs today like fuel that I don't understand how they can operate, to tell you the truth.
All the regulations and stuff, when you're out shrimping, they're taking your profit right away from you.
In the 1990s, government regulations dealt shrimpers another financial setback with a mandate of turtle excluder devices, known as TEDs, and fish eyes. While marine conservationists herald TEDs for saving the lives of thousands of sea turtles, shrimpers disagree on the need and impact of the devices.
We pull these turtle excluders now, we call it a TED. We fish excluder and a turtle excluder, so I got both. And it's regulation. This is the turtle excluder. Anything bigger than these will hit these bars and go out. A turtle or, big fish, big shark or something other.
They've had to deal with changing regulations, specifically dealing with environmental concerns, things like bycatch of endangered species such as turtles.
In the 1990s, laws also required shrimpers to implement bycatch reduction devices, which reduced the amount of fish they catch.
And that was a huge expense to the shrimp fleet.
Now, pretty much all we catch is just shrimp. Some little tiny fish, stuff like that, and crabs, whatever, but for the most part, it's just shrimp. Years ago, we'd catch sharks and, big old fish, all kind of stuff. We never really caught any amount of turtles. 99% of the time you catch them, they'd be alive. You throw them back over. So, we never hurt turtles, but they claimed we did.
They make you reduce your bycatch and all this, but it reduces your main catch also.
The local restaurants, there are a handful that you can get Gulf shrimp at. Oftentimes you'll go to the restaurants on the island. You could be sitting at a restaurant on the beach or on the bay looking right at shrimp boats, and you're eating shrimp from China.
Higher costs and lower market prices mean shrimpers have to bring in around a couple $1,000s of pink gold every night. And development of the historic waterfront is changing the face and base of the once flourishing industry.
I figure now it's about $2,000 a day is you know, they can survive. We used to pay 50 cents a gallon for fuel, and now we pay $3.50 a gallon. That totals up to almost $1,000 a day just to run the boat.
You're constantly worried about fuel. Is it worth it to even go? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes we tie the boat up and just sit right here.
We're losing the battle because, you know, it's all about development now and building.
The flourish of Asian aquaculture delivered yet another punch.
The industry was doing real well until probably about 20 years ago when they started agriculture. Started growing the shrimp all along the equator, Ecuador, Thailand, Vietnam, India. Dug up the rice paddies and so forth and started raising shrimp. Prices kind of got stagnant at that time.
There are so many imports that really drives the prices of shrimp down, and so they haven't been able to compete on that market as well as they would have liked to.
Imports, namely pond-raised shrimp, has lowered the price and kept it lower for many, many, many years.
It's a very superior product, as you can imagine. Caught wild instead of sitting in ponds.
Imported frozen shrimp, you know, there's so many things that I don't know about it.
They've traveled, you know, a million miles, and they could be raised in a pond with bacteria and chemicals and all that antibiotics and stuff like that. And no comparison compared to a fresh caught shrimp.
We're blessed with one of the highest quality shrimps in the whole world. And so, generally speaking, compared to a farm-raised shrimp, there is no comparison.
It's harder and harder now with the federal requirements and the licenses that they're required, and the cost of fuel and the cost of the boats, and a lot of the boats have electronics on board and computers and things, so it's becoming more and more expensive to be a commercial fisherman. They just have to work harder and smarter, so it kind of weeds out the ones that aren't producing.
The reason I stopped fishing is because the boat got too old, and I got too old, and we had to go too far away, and it just cost too much to maintain them anymore.
It got where it's pretty hard, and it is still a great business, but you got to be tough, and you got to keep everything close to your vest to be able to make it.
You know, they can be profitable.
Half their boats make money and half of them don't. You know, it depends. If something breaks that year, you didn't make any money.
There's times of the year where a shrimp boat does not make a profit, but I keep mine going and I look at it as a whole year or several years, because I just can't stop. My captains, my crews have got mouths to feed, they've got bills to pay, so they get paid directly on what they catch.